Welcome everybody again to another episode of the ideaXme show, the show that profiles the humans behind the really big ideas that are shaping our world, inspiring the future, and for all those that like really great stories. I'm Ira Pastor, here as your aging and longevity ambassador along for this journey. For the last few months, we have been profiling many of the sort of cutting edge biotechnology stories and the things that are in the pipeline for moving us into what we call sort of this 21st century curative model, where we can begin to have an impact on many of the chronic degenerative diseases responsible for human suffering and death, and push us into an era of extended health spans, rejuvenation, lifespan. And when you listen to people in the longevity sort of biotech community talk, whether they are the more traditional or slightly less conservative or on the more radical end of things, you routinely hear the same general expression. And that is that our goal is to make 70 or 90 or 150 or 300 or whatever it may be, the new 50. These are very interesting and worthwhile goals to strive for. But let's ask the question, what is 50? Because from our perspective, it's much more than just a chronological or biological age. Going back sort of to the dawn of human prehistory through the Bronze Age, Iron Age, there was no 50. A saber-toothed cat, a spear tip would see to that. Up until a few hundred years ago, 50 was reachable. But for most part, it was the end of life. In came better sanitation practices. We now reach 50, but it's an older 50. Then we move into the era of our great-grandparents, our grandparents. The antibiotic comes along. We have vaccines, better health care. Now we're past 50, but it's 50, 50 plus that's, what we'll call a little closer to out to pasture, slowing down, playing golf, taking cruises. But now, in 2019, 50 is a much different thing. The 50 and 50 population are a much more vibrant, vital, invigorated group. Come to think of it, I turned 50 this year. As a generation, they are, the over 50 set are become extremely critical and important demographic. We're a large, powerful, growing generation, major political, social, economic standing, representing literally trillions of dollars of wealth. And with the ongoing development of new technologies, knowledge in the area of human health, 50 in many ways represents a window into sort of what the future world of a perpetual 50 may very much look like throughout the next millennium. So today's guest, who I'm quite excited to have with us today, we're going to discuss this and other topics further, is David Stewart. David is the CEO and founder of Ageism, which is a global movement focused on living longer and better than ever before. Their tagline is "Live fast, die old." The Ageist business purpose is basically to reinvent how life after 50 is lived, experienced, and understood. And it's a different world for people our age than our parents' world, and we're here to explore it. David is an expert on and a passionate champion of the emerging global over 50 lifestyle, including culture, style, travel, and the health sciences. All that being said, David, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. We typically start the show by giving our guests the floor and basically hearing your story. Tell us about yourself, your background, your journey, and what led you to create the Ageist organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's funny, like all good things, it was an accident. There was no great plan or strategy. What happened was about almost 5 years ago, I've had a long career as working at the top level advertising photographer. What I started to notice, Ira, was I'm getting older. At that point, I was 55, 56. But I'm continuing taking pictures of people that are 22. So there was this kind of funny thing, like myself and my friends were getting older, and the objects of the advertising and the media were all kind of staying the same. And then, simultaneously with that, what I noticed was that as I looked around the media landscape, I didn't see myself really portrayed, or anybody that I knew. It was this funny sort of fuddy-duddy, highly medicalized version of people my age. And I thought, I don't know anybody like that. We tend to feel we're at the top of our game. I'm stronger than I've ever been in my life. Where are these people? And so we started to do some research about this, as to why there were these portrayals in the media, and there were a lot of reasons for that. And then we investigated. We did thousands and thousands of hours of interviews, trying to understand what was different about this new generation. And so much of it pivots around what you were saying earlier, that really the people at 50 now, if you have a certain level of education and income, you can have a reasonable expectation of only being halfway through your life. Mm-hmm. So this has never happened before in human history. Right. So if someone has a belief system set around being alive another 50 years and having a functional health span for most of that, that's essentially a do-over. So we've never had that, and that really changes people's behavior. It changes what they buy, what their ambitions are, their sense of agency in the world, their focus. It's a very different thing than, as you were pointing out, like my mom is 89. So I'm currently 60. When my mom was 60, that was old. Mm-hmm. She retired, and, she was playing canasta with the ladies in the neighborhood. That's not the way it is now. So people now, they're starting new businesses, they're getting married again, they're doing all kinds of things. It's a very, very different world. And sort of, some of the interesting language I've heard used around this is that really what's happened is there's sort of an atrium, another, this room in your lifespan has expanded. So the kind of time period between the periods of great responsibility, like when you've got the kids and, there's a lot of drama with your job. Once the kids leave, so maybe 30 years ago, there would have been a span of time, maybe it was 5 years or 7 years, kind of before you moved into elderly, right? And those sort of issues. So what's happened is this time period has grown dramatically. This life phase has grown dramatically. So it's a little, people ask me what are the numbers on this, and it kind of varies from individual, but you can say that what used to be maybe between 50 and 60 is now more like 50 to 75 or 50 to 80. And so this is a period of people not only consuming, but also contributing. Mm-hmm. So these people they're earning, they're out there, they're doing things. This has never happened before in human history. And, as you were saying, as these developments keep moving forward, the extended lifespans, extended health spans, this group is only going to grow and grow. And really what we're talking about here is the delay of the elderly phase. Mm-hmm. So it's not like that's going to go away. It's just pushed back further.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to look at it. It's, one of the things in my segment is this sort of the health span component, and sort of the increasing of that. We might not be able to extend lifespan dramatically, but if we can stay healthy the entire time here, as you said, it's a whole new window. It's a whole second chance at lots of being able to do lots of things. I noticed on your website and in your publications, you have this ongoing, growing roster of profiles of people across various disciplines, the arts, music, business, sports. You're presenting these curious, energetic, forward-leaning examples about how 50 and 50 plus is being lived nowadays. And you know what, I think back to when I was younger and I used to sort of sit on the couch watching some show, and there would be a famous actor or actress on, Katharine Hepburn or Cary Grant or Betty Davis, something like that, and my parents would be like, wow, they've gotten so old. And I go to your site and I look, and I see Andy McDowell, Kevin Costner, Christy Curlington, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, wait a second, I grew up with them and they look the same to me as they do now. So what is the core message behind what these folks are doing? Is it about health and wellness? Is it about staying active, family cohesiveness? What are you seeing as sort of themes behind what is keeping some of these folks so young and vibrant?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's really a combination of things. I think the first, most important thing is what you started out with, the advances in medicine. Mm-hmm. So first, people have to be able to live longer. And then secondly, people have to have an expectation of living longer. So if you expect you're going to live longer, you're going to behave in a way to cause that to happen. Mm-hmm. I think the second thing is this, the commonality we see is curiosity. And we do, it's true, we do in some of our social feeds talk about famous people because other people like to see famous people. But, for most of the people that we profile in Ageist, they're people you would just see out on the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. They're just, more or less regular people. We do the occasional billionaire, but we tend to stay away from that just because we'd like people to understand that there's an attainable possibility for living this way, that it's not crazy. Like you don't need to you have $1 billion or be a movie star to have these sort of attributes. Mm-hmm. But I think really the core driving force here is curiosity. So we see that this is something that's common to really all of our people. If one is curious and one has a certain drive to go forward and investigate things, right away, you're aware of these advances in medical science. You're filled with the desire to have a sense of agency in the world, to have impact. You want to keep growing. We also see there's the contrary to that, which is the lack of curiosity. And, one can be 25 and become a fossil. It's not really age dependent. It's something that's, it's the main driver we find of people in this space.
Curiosity. No, I love that. I definitely love that. I think of people in my life that sort of, as you said, they become a fossil at a very young age, and then I think of my in-laws or whatever, and one of the big things is staying active and getting up in the morning and being interested in doing something, and that's, I think, unfortunately, too many people overlook that, and they think, it's just going to be about some new drug or some genetic technology, but there's this whole, what we typically refer to as this architecture of life that, you can have all the great drugs and tools in the world, but, if you don't get out in the sunshine, you don't take a walk now and then, you don't have positive thoughts, you don't, just participate in life, you're missing a big part of it. Speaking, sort of along those lines, I was just interested, and I don't know if you've gotten feedback on this from sort of some of the audience and the people that you profile, but I'm just very interested in how some of this, the new, as we'll say, the new 50 and the new 50 plus community sort of looks at activity in my day job segment. So, I work in the area of biotech and longevity biotech, and in this industry are various what we'll call factions. You have sort of the people that are developing the sort of the health span technologies, the process of slowing down aging, sort of thinking about the tortoise, how we can slowly, decrease the rate of aging. On the other hand, those are those that say, there's nothing is going to be useful unless we're going to be like the immortal jellyfish and be able to turn back time entirely and become childlike again. Rather radical. But and when I read through the profiles, I see on some hands, people that are applying sort of some of these tools, but on the other hand, I see, and actually I see this in my own life in a way, sort of, I have a few more silver hairs. I have slightly a more chiseled, weathered face than I had when I was younger, but I actually appreciate that, I think, more now that I'm here than I would have when I was younger. What do you know? And in some ways, it seems like, this picture of 50 as it stands today may be something that is sort of the prize thing, as opposed to sort of the 20-something, which hasn't experienced life yet, which hasn't gone out and dipped into everything that the world has to offer. I know that was sort of a long-winded question, but sort of like your feedback on that.
Well, I think that that was a long question, Ira. But
I didn't really do that. Sorry.
Let me try and unpack that. So, really, this idea of this sort of youth obsession is really in the course of human history, a very new phenomenon. So, for instance, if you look at the films from the 50s, you would have an actress who's, you had Grace Kelly, who was maybe 21, and she's dressing like she's 45 or 50.
Right.
Cary Grant was not dressing like an 18-year-old. He was dressing like a 50-year-old. So the emphasis up until probably early 60s was to look older than you were, because that was that's where the value was. And, in the 60s, really that all changed. So, and I think a lot of that was around the sexual revolution and the sense of vitality and liberation. And then youth culture became what was really the ideal. And people started to look at that, and age became very important. One of the interesting things I learned was the song Happy Birthday was actually written in the late 1800s. And it wasn't really popularized until, I think it was like 1928 or 29. Nobody really, and the reason for that is nobody cared what your birthday was. Nobody cared how old you were. It was entirely immaterial. It was, what was important was, what's your value?
Right.
Can you do this job or not? Are you useful in the family or are you not? What's your knowledge base? These were the things that were important. Nobody, it wasn't, how old are you? It was like, can you do this job or can't you? And that's sort of changed. And I think that a lot of, young people are wonderful, and young people have a certain sort of openness and naivete coupled with energy that's fantastic. And, we can learn a lot from that. But I think that the sort of idealization of youth and the way youth looks is a bit problematic. That can cause people a lot of problems.
Thank you for distilling down my question, and you hit it right on the head. I won't do that again to you, by the way.
It's okay.
Taking a slightly different turn now. So, I sit on this Human Enhancement Council of the World Economic Forum, and there's a few folks there from the World Health Organization. And, I was looking through the sort of their book on disease, and interestingly, ageism is in there. And I was looking at this the other day. And so the World Health Organization's definition of ageism is they define it as a stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination against people on the basis of their age, overlooked for employment, restricted from social services, stereotyped in the media. It marginalizes and excludes older people in their communities. And then it says ageism is everywhere, yet it is the most socially normalized of any of the prejudices, unlike racism or sexism. Why is this? And obviously this is something you're going to change, but why has it been so normalized?
Well, I think that it's been only normalized in the last 40 or 50 years. Mm-hmm. As I said, previous to this, it's not normalized. And I think this normalization, as we call it, really only applies to certain sectors. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to hire a 25-year-old architect to do your house, or a brain surgeon, or, we really haven't elected a president like under 60 in some time. I think Barack was in his 50s. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's some issues here. And I think that part of it is the cultural idealization of youth. Mm-hmm. There's the misconception. There's a whole kind of litany of misconceptions. The first is that older people can't learn. This is entirely untrue. Right. Every single skill that I use in my life today, I learned in the last 4 years. Outside of taking pictures, everything. I didn't know nothing. I had to learn all that. People, I think that it's an interesting thing. This, if you start to idealize youth, and then you create these various age silos within the culture, mm-hmm. You then start to segment and polarize things, and it becomes an us versus them sort of thing. And you can see, like, if you're in a culture, you go to somewhere. I was in Spain 2 years ago on this little island of Mallorca, and we went to some little like outdoor nightclub cafe thing, and there were people there from 14 to 90. Mm-hmm. It was fine. Nobody thought anything different of it. Now, I would not be asking a younger person to do something that wouldn't be appropriate to them. And I probably wouldn't ask the 90-year-old guy to go like push the 400-pound fishing boat out into the ocean. Mm-hmm. So there are certain capacities that are age dependent. But I think that they are to a tremendous degree exaggerated. Mm-hmm. And I think it's it's something that really needs to be dealt with here. I mean, we're looking at, the first time in human history, there are now more people over 65 than under the age of 5. Mm-hmm. So what are you going to do? You're going to take like a quarter or a third of the population, you're going to marginalize them? And then what's that going to do to like, there's all this talk about, social welfare programs and the safety net. So you're not going to allow these people to work, and then what are you going to do? You're going to, like, the rest of the culture is going to support them? That's crazy. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a problem, Ira. I can't tell you exactly where it came from, but I can tell you that just from an economic point of view, it's unsustainable. You can't keep doing this.
Agreed. Completely agreed. I appreciate that. Moving on to another topic. A couple of years ago, in the New York Times, it was 5 or 6 years ago actually, there was an article written. It was titled "The Graying of Naughty," and it was an analysis of the internet. I have to look into sort of the processes and the the techniques they used, but I guess whatever. There's hundreds of billions of web pages now. There's a decent percentage which are dedicated to sex and sexuality, and they did this analysis that showed the trending in the direction of there was less focus on, once again, the youthful side of sex and sexuality, but moving more into this 50 plus category. And what was really interesting is after that article, I did some more research on that, and then newspapers all over the world the last several years have been sort of telling the same story in this very interesting trend. What speak to this, if you can, about, once again, we're talking about arts and sports and music and business and culture, but sex, major theme in the world. Here are some interesting trends, and I think they, in many ways, are mimicking and coming up against what we've been discussing in terms of how things are shifting in today's day and age in 2019. What does that say about us? We are, is because we're 50 plus, we're more vigorous now than we were when we were younger, just like I'm stronger now than I was when I was 20. What do you think about some of these trends?
Yeah, well, I think once again, it all pivots across this idea of people are living longer, they're living healthier lives. So that has a whole range of behavioral consequences. Mm-hmm. So if you look at the divorce rates for people over 55, I want to say they've doubled since 1990. Mm-hmm. And the fastest growing group of people on Match.com are people over 65. Mm-hmm. So, this kind of all goes hand in hand. If you think that, well, there's more pornography aimed at people who are over 50. I mean, part of that is there's just more people over 50. And not only are there more people over 50, but they're like a different kind of animal than they were 20 or 30 years ago. So this doesn't surprise me in the least. When we started Ageist, one of the first places we went to do research was Tinder. So we looked at about 5,000 Tinder profiles for people. The upper age limit on Tinder is, I think, 45. It's just 45 plus. Mm-hmm. We looked at that to see what's going on there. And it's, there's this, I think really what's interesting about this is that it's interesting at all, that it just makes complete sense. Right. The problem here, Ira, is that we as a group, and I'm 60, we're presented as this infantilized, medicalized, powerless group of people stumbling around in the world. We're not. No. So the dissonance there is really that image to what's really going on. Mm-hmm. And so to think that there are people like, having these active sex lives, they're dating and they're over 50, well, of course, that's not the story. Right. The story is, why do we think this isn't true? Mm-hmm. Like that's what seems nuts to me.
Got it. Yeah, makes complete sense. So typically at this point in the show, before we wrap up, we sort of move away from our core theme and we sort of go into the realm of fantasy a bit here, science fiction. David Stewart, I'm going to allow you to take a trip in my time machine that I developed, which is sitting in the other room. You can go anywhere you want to go, as far to the past, the future as you desire. You're going to meet somebody and have a conversation. Who is the person that you would like to meet from either the past or the future? And what do you want to talk to them about? And take your time with that one if you
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Well, all right. So I'm going to go backwards
Mm-hmm.
because it's hard for me to imagine. I have a poverty of imagination about the future, clearly. So, maybe if I was more imaginative, I'd say I'd want to talk to Elon Musk in 15 years and see if he's on Mars. I don't know.
That's a good one. Nothing wrong with that.
But I mean, I sort of like being the age that I am, I really liked the way that the 70s were. The 70s got kind of a bad rap, but it was a time of people were less careful, and the culture was more tightly bound. So the extremes, there weren't the kind of wealth disparities that there are now. There wasn't. There's a lot more, especially in like I was in New York City. There was a fantastic kind of flamboyance to the dress that people wore and the kind of lifestyles that they led.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of those people are dead now. It didn't work out for them. It goes with that. But I think it would be very interesting to, see at, my current age, 60, what I was looking at when I was 14, to see like, was it really not as nice as I recall it to be? I would because we kind of idealize these things, and I would like to kind of go back and say like, oh no, that was really kind of terrible. Those people were really unhealthy and they were chain smoking, they were having martinis at lunch, and that's not a good thing. Or like, wow, these people were like super cool. Like, what can we learn from them?
That would indeed be fascinating. I don't have the for some reason I was a couple of years after, but I don't have the fondest recollection of the 70s either. But hey, that might be just what the brief amount that I remember. David, it's really been a pleasure. Is there anything before we end that you want to take us out with, things that we should know about, the new initiatives that the organization is going to be getting into? Take us out and take your time, but I'm giving you the floor. I'd love to hear more. That's not confidential, but please.
Yes. So what you see on our site is our publishing, which is how we connect to our community. It's one of the ways that we grow our community, and we stay in touch with them. But we also, our business model is we work with brands. Mm-hmm. So we help brands produce content. We help them understand people like myself. And then we're having our first conference, which is June 11th in Los Angeles. We've got some pretty heavy hitters coming in. We've got Chip Connolly talking about intergenerational workforces. We've got Naveen Jain, who is talk about a large imagination. He has a mining permit on the moon. I have to ask him what he's going to do with that. We have Paul Irving, and then we have a bunch of people, Gita Wilson, who's reimagining the insurance industry. We have Jonathan Chung, head of design from Levi's, coming in. Levi's being one of the few companies that markets to people from like 0 to 90, and what that's like. And then I'll be expanding on a lot of the knowledge base that we've, and a lot of data that we have on people like myself that we've accumulated over the last 4 years. So that's super exciting. I'm going to be on the main stage at the Wellness Summit in Hong Kong in October, and we're moving into podcasting next. So
excellent,
more and more.
Excellent. Send me all those links, and we'll have them connected with the video and all the radio links and so forth moving forward. But
you should come, Ira. It's going to be great. The conference is going to be awesome.
Yeah, it sounds great. I think I'd like to actually put that on the calendar. Okay, well, once again, thanks, David, so much. Once again, for everybody, David Stewart, CEO, founder of Ageist. Live fast, die old. David, it's really been a pleasure just spending the time in your schedule, sharing your ideas, sharing your knowledge, and it's a fascinating thing you're doing, and clear from my side, it's clearly the right time for all this to be happening, and it's going to be an exciting 50 for myself too, moving forward. But it's I think you're right in the hot spot, and sort of for the next millennia.
Thank you so much.
It was a real pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it, Ira. Thank you so much.